If there are no other announcements, bad jokes, puns, song requests, no Freebird? There's not even a sarcastic Freebird? Freebird! All right. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing the closing keynote for code4lib 2016, Gabriel Weinberg. He is the founder and CEO of DuckDuckGo, the search engine that doesn't track you over 3 billion searches and doesn't track you with over 3 billion searches in 2015. Previously, he was the co-founder and CEO of OpenBox, which was acquired in 2006. Gabriel resides in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and is on Twitter at YEGG. He has a BS in physics and an MS in technology and policy from MIT. So please welcome our closing keynote, Gabriel. Thank you.
Hello. I'm really honored to be here and that you invited me. I pretty much turned down every engagement request, so take that as you will. I really like the organization and what you're doing. But the flip side of that is I don't get out of my office much, and so this is not super timed probably well. I've never given this talk before, but I put something together for you. I hope I don't talk too long, and then we'll have time to take any questions you like. I did put one joke in here, so I guess we'll see if anyone notices it. That is not the joke. So as a, as she mentioned, DuckDuckGo is a search engine that doesn't track you. So what does that mean? It means when you search on DuckDuckGo, you're completely anonymous. We throw away all your personal information and don't associate it with search results, and in fact, don't even connect search results together. So there's no notion of search history on DuckDuckGo. So as a show of hands thing, because I am just super curious, who's heard of DuckDuckGo outside of this conference before? Okay, I wish that was the whole world. Who's actually tried DuckDuckGo? Who's a semi-user of DuckDuckGo? And who has it as their primary search engine? Okay, cool. Thank you. Would love to increase those numbers. And I'm going to talk to you about that. So, let's see here. Command F, thank you. Shift Command F. How do you advance? Arrow keys. Thank you. Okay. Can we do like slideshow mode or something? There we go. Yeah. Thank you, whoever's coming to help me. So anyway, we did about 3 billion searches last year. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it's not a lot when you compare it to Google. So we're very proud of where we've come over the years, but we feel like we have a lot to go. We're built into Safari and Firefox, not as the default search engine, but as a default option. So in the US, it's Google, Yahoo, Bing, and us. And then we're in about 90 other browsers and distributions, a lot of Linux, Firefox, and things like that, where we are the default for kind of organizations who care more about privacy as a focus. So we focus as a company on things that we think Google can't or won't copy easily. The two primary ones of those are privacy, which I'm going to talk about, and then open source instant answers, which I'm also going to talk about if I was good for this particular audience. So I give you a little history. I started DuckDuckGo, actually before this graph even existed. So in 2008, so the first 2 years of it was just completely flat. And that was just me by myself coding, like every line of code in my basement mainly. And then around 2011, where the curve starts to tick up a little more, it started to become something that people would actually switch to. At least some people would try it out, early adopters. And at that point, I realized it could be something bigger and started recruiting a team. And so now we're about 40 people scattered around the world. Happy to get into that if anyone's interested, more the company side. But we have basically a work wherever, whenever policy. And so we have people scattered everywhere. And we hired everyone from our community. And so literally that means anyone can pop up in any country. So we have like someone in Japan and in France and Italy. A lot of countries we have basically just one person working there. So privacy. I'm going to take you through a little bit about why people care about online privacy. The most common and annoying and emotionally resonant example that everyone gets in the mainstream is retargeting ads. So these ads that follow you around the internet everywhere you go. This screenshot is from 2010. So you can see how long this has been going on. And then it just keeps getting worse each year with the rise, which is correlated very closely with the rise of ad blockers. And generally, just it's annoying to be tracked around the internet. But this is really just kind of the tip of the iceberg, because what this really entails on the back end is someone or some company making a profile about you and then using it to follow you around. So you do a search, say, and then you see whatever you search for, on another site that you never actually visited before, and you see the ad for it. So you have to think that, well, if that profile exists and they use it to show me this ad, what else could they be using it for? And that's where you get into the more deeper privacy harms. And so the second one that I usually tell people about is price discrimination. So when you land on a retailer site nowadays on the internet, there's a decent chance something is getting tailored to you specifically, even if you've never visited that retailer before at all. And they're looking at information on your computer, from ad networks, or usually ad networks, or sometimes kind of data brokers with ad networks, to then, which they buy, and then they use it to often change the price on you. And so you can sit next to somebody else and see a different price on a retailer. Most people feel this crosses the line for their sensibilities, as do I. So this is also from 2012, so it's actually been going on a while. But part of the problem is which I'm going to get into, is there's no regulation on this whatsoever. So not even basic transparency regulation. So we actually don't know how much this is going on in general. It's taken investigative journalism to uncover things here and there. And the frequency of that has been increased, but we literally don't know how pervasive it is. Now, if I'm normally talking to people about privacy, I would often stop at these two because they're both, it's enough for people and they're emotionally resonant, but this is a different type of audience. And so I want to go a bit deeper and tell you about two more detailed, nuanced privacy harms that I particularly find troublesome. And so the next one is called the filter bubble. So as a show of hands, who heard of the filter bubble concept? Okay. So the filter bubble concept is essentially another extension of the profile about you. So if you think about the profile about you, it's really them putting you into a category or a set of categories. And this is not my joke, by the way, but I like The Simpsons. And so what that means on the internet is sites are serving you things they think that you're more likely to click on. Some contexts, that could be good. If you're on a site that you opted into and want recommendations, maybe it's Netflix or Amazon in certain contexts, you may want that. You want to see things that you're more likely to click on. But in other contexts, you may not. And the reason you may not is because, by definition, if you're getting seen things that they're different than other people that they think you're going to click on, that means they're filtering out things that you don't think you're going to click on. And that's why it's called the filter bubble, because they're basically putting you in a bubble of what they think they know about you, and they're filtering out what they think you're not going to like. So in the search engine context, this can be particularly pernicious because you approach searching with some expectation of objectivity, especially in certain subjects like political research. And so this is from essentially the original filter bubble work that was the book. They found that when people were searching Barack Obama, that more left-wing people were seeing MSNBC more, and more right-wing people were seeing Fox News more. And in the aggregate, this leads to increased partisanship because people are literally seeing less opposing viewpoints over time and just keeping themselves in kind of a idea bubble that they already agree with. Now, we ran our own series of studies in the 2012 election cycle, where we literally had people across the world, it was a decent-sized study, search the exact same things at exactly the same time, and in incognito mode, which I'll get into in a minute. And we saw that people were vastly seeing different links. This is just one illustration, but this was basically exemplifies the entire thing. So this was a search for gun control, and after the kind of the Wikipedia link at the top, it all went different. And in fact, some people actually didn't even see the Wikipedia link at the top as the first link. In doing this study, this is kind of an aside, but we actually discovered something else, which when one of the searches we had people search was Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. And we found that when you searched for Barack Obama, searches thereafter, we term this magic keywords. So Barack Obama was a magic keyword. So if you search for Barack Obama, and then you did like a search on gun control, you would see 3 additional results inserted into the results that said, because you searched for Barack Obama on the first one, the second 2 weren't labeled. And so subsequent searches that they thought were correlated at all, so like issues, for example, you'd see additional Barack Obama stuff. However, the problem with that is Mitt Romney was not a magic keyword. So for millions and millions of people who searched for Barack Obama, their subsequent searches, basically ad infinitum political searches, had a bunch of extra Barack Obama stuff in there, which was really hard to notice, and there wasn't any for Mitt Romney. Now, I honestly think this might have had a decent-sized impact on the election. I don't know what, we can't really know, but like these are people searching for political things in a kind of mode of objectivity, and they're kind of surreptitiously getting more of one candidate. So that's really the filter bubble. The fourth one is this notion of chilling effects, which is probably very well known to this audience in general in terms of free speech, but maybe less known applied to this context. So Pew Research has done a great series of privacy studies over the last 2 years since Snowden, trying to track people's behavioral changes to technology after finding about corporate and government surveillance, and also just feeling about what people think about privacy. So one of the things that they found is that a quarter of people have started changing their habits around technology, and they broke it down further into different technologies, including search engines. So the percentage for search engines was 17%. So what that essentially means is 17% of people at some point in the recent past, these are Americans at least, are not searching whatever, whenever they want. They are self-censoring their searches because they feel some repercussion, either corporate or government. And I think that's a decent-sized chilling effect. When oftentimes what I hear back about privacy is that it's like a 1-2% issue. And I think it's actually way more than that. And some of these statistics I'm going to share with you now basically show that. But I think people think it's a 1 to 2% thing, even though a larger percentage of people are actually concerned and doing something about it. And so this kind of illustrates that. And if you take a step back a little bit with some of these, you see even bigger numbers. So Pew asked particular scenarios what people kind of would be interested in. And 40% of people said they were interested in a search engine that wouldn't track their activity, which of course is great motivation for us. But in general, it's showing that it's a larger percentage of people who are actually interested in this. And then if you take a step further back, most Americans have taken some step to mask their digital identity online, and this includes things like, making a fake name is what they asked, and clearing your cookies and things like that. But most say they are unaware of really what they can do. Like there's a huge gap between education, and this I think plays into libraries to some degree, and what people want to do and what they know that they can do. And then finally, like the furthest step back, pretty much everyone, I think it's hard to get above 90% in any poll. So pretty much everyone thinks that people have lost control of their information online. And I look at this as, you could look at this two ways. You could say it's kind of a glass half full or glass half empty scenario. The glass half empty scenario is privacy is dead, get over it, which I obviously don't hold. The glass half full scenario is, we've never really had the debate yet about where the line is for online tracking. So if you think about every other area of technology embedded in our society, so like medical, military, agricultural, financial, we have regulations around where, as a society, we wanted to place limits as to the use of that technology. We have not really done that for online tracking. And Snowden and now Apple are really starting, finally have that debate, which I think is excellent. Europe has gone ahead in this a bit with regulation to some degree. And I'm not like a pro-regulation person, but I think this needs to have some limits at some point, and that needs to be regulatory. You can argue about Europe's regulations, whether they're good or not, but that's a good argument to have because maybe we can make better ones. But in the US so far, it's been very self-regulatory. So what has that gotten us? It's gotten us a do not track setting in the browser that essentially does nothing. It's a voluntary setting that I find very misleading. Now, we support trying to make it better, and we've been involved in that. But right now, like people go on their browser and they hit do not track, and it basically literally does nothing. And then the other thing that people mainly do is go in incognito mode, which literally does say in bold now, like it's gotten bigger. So go in incognito doesn't hide your browsing from your employer, your internet service provider, or the websites you visit. Yet, no one understands this. And so this is another study that we're going to do ourselves and try to figure out the gulf between what people think about private browsing mode and what it actually does. Our hunch, and we have a lot of anecdotal evidence to support this, that everyone thinks it means that you're anonymous on the internet, which it doesn't mean at all. It really means this. That was my one joke. So what can you do about it? Well, at the moment, you can support organizations that are really trying to push forward real regulation here, which is like the EFF. And then you can use or support in some way that you can services that are trying to take a privacy by design approach, like a DuckDuckGo, or tools that you can add onto your browser, like EFF has a bunch, like HTTPS everywhere. Now, what we've learned, this is transitioning to the second part, is that it's not enough. Like, we have this term called frictionless privacy. People do want privacy, but they don't want to give up that much for it, which I can understand. Like in the search engine context, you want to get your results. So we've realized that it is great to have privacy, but we also have to have everything that you expect, and we hope more. So what do you expect now from search engines? You expect quick information at the top. So like when you search, you get some Wikipedia snippet or something. You expect images, you expect news, you expect maps and local. And so we've worked over the last 2 years really to close all these gaps so that there's no excuse for people not wanting to try us out. And we think we've gotten pretty far on that. And so like people who maybe tried us out in the past should give us another try. But more to the point, we don't want to just be like a me too. We want to go in our own direction and have a better search experience, that Google still won't go. And so our answer to that is DuckDuckHack, which is the second piece I wanted to talk to you about, which is our open source instant answer platform. So instant answers. When you're searching, you generally want an answer. That's our main premise. And basically we've been ahead on that. Like we started doing this right from the beginning. That was one of my thesis for the company back in 2008. But all those other search engines have come on board to that now. And that just means something that is an answer above the link. So you'd rather answer your search at least partially with 0 clicks instead of digging around in the web results. Now, if you think about search, you can divide it into lots of different categories. So you are searching for images sometimes, you're searching for restaurants sometimes, but then depending on who you are, you're searching for very niche topics. So if you're like a database administrator who does a lot of MySQL, you have a lot of MySQL queries. If you code in Perl, like a lot of our staff, you have a lot of Perl queries. And each of those like areas of the search has a community associated with it, generally online. And generally over the last 10 years, they've built up a lot of structured data around that community. So be it accessible through an API or a database or a wiki or even offline, not too queryable through the internet, but not like displayed. And so what we're trying to do with DuckDuckHack is empower our users who are in those individual communities to come in and say, I want to make my own search experience better, and that for everyone who's in my community, and help us connect those right APIs to the searches. And that's kind of the vision of DuckDuckHack. So what do you get when you do that? Well, you get Mario instant answers because people are interested in all different things. And we want the search engine to be the best for each one of these categories. So this one comes from the Mario Wiki. You get math kind of stuff or any kind of professional or academic pursuits. You get MySQL, as I mentioned. And really, if you think about building out a space, and I think we're still just at the infancy of this, but if you think about building out a space of the best search experience for, say, MySQL, it's really not just one instant answer, it's a set of instant answers. And so I'm going to illustrate that. So this is a cheat sheet, we call it, which is just a quick reference guide for MySQL. We only have about 200 of these in the search engine right now. And then we also have like deeper information for things that would not make it to a cheat sheet, but any kind of keyword associated with MySQL from their reference documentation gets put in this type of instant answer. And then we also have we pulled in the database administrator Stack Exchange, and we have a full text search of that. And so you can start to see that if you approach an area from a lot of different angles, you can start to cover a decent portion of, say, people's MySQL queries. And that would be our goal, is to do that for each of these communities. So you also get things that you don't expect when you turn it over to the community. So like someone made this, which we love. We would have never made this ourselves. Like there's a site that tells you who's in space all the time, and they have an API. And so now you can just type in people in space, and you see who's in space. And we had made for ourselves a long time ago a very simple color picker. I made it initially, just when designing the site. You would type in like a hex color and see other analogous colors and things. And then someone in the community came in and took it like interactive and made it just way better. So this is kind of another area where we think that the platform could go if people are interested. So like taking in the MySQL thing, like you could make an interactive instant answer around queries analysis or something. And then finally, like it runs backend code too. So like someone made this QR code generator. And Perl, whoever codes in Perl, has CPAN, which is like gazillion modules. So this is just some module sitting out in CPAN. And someone was like, oh, we could put this on the search engine. And so you can do cool things like that too. And so my illustration here is just that the possibilities, well, I wouldn't say are endless, but they're vast, and like we want to support like cool and interesting things. So okay, so tying those things together, we recently over the last 6 months like did a reevaluation of our vision and mission as a company, and we settled on this vision of raising the standard of trust online. And essentially what that means is we want to exist as a company that kind of proves to the world that a company can compete in a major market and deliver a real alternative that also has privacy by design, and that will prove to everybody that there is a standard. Like the standard doesn't have to race to the bottom on privacy. That's not inevitable. You can actually have a product that works kind of up here. So our mission, which is like how we're working on implementing that vision over the last 2 years and going forward the next few years, is to build the world's most trusted search engine. And in our mission statement, trust is really doing double duty here. So it's both that we want to inspire trust in our users to be able to search wherever they want. So it gets rid of that chilling effect I mentioned earlier, as well as reduce the privacy harms of the other ones. So people tracking you across the internet essentially and putting you in a filter bubble. But it also means that you actually have to trust that you're getting results that you want on DuckDuckGo. And so you're not having any major sacrifice. And so it really is serving both of those kind of methods of trust. And actually, internally, trust is our main value internally, which has different implications, but it leads to things like our work wherever, whenever policy, that kind of stuff. So with that, a call to get involved. If anything I said interested you, check out DuckDuckGo or DuckDuckHack, and I am happy to take questions. I'm done.
Great, so questions. We have microphone runners, so please raise your hand or make a signal if you have a question. We'll go with over there and then...
How do you think the quality of your search compares to Google in terms of the amount of resources that you index and the results?
So early on, I decided, first I started crawling the web myself. This was back in 2007 before incorporating the thing. And then quickly realized that was a complete uphill battle. And that's how Google would want you to compete with them, and that's how a lot of search engines died in the mid-2000s. At the same point, I went and looked at Yahoo and Bing, and Yandex at the time also had a English index that was coming up, and actually looked at the link variation, and it wasn't that wide, actually. And Microsoft had done a study where they had actually taken Google's logo and put it on their results, and people perceived them to be better. And so from that, I concluded that the links itself were reached diminishing returns, and that the real value add was on the instant answers. And so decided to not worry so much about crawling the web fully and use other APIs for that, and try to add value on top via the instant answers. So for many years, we did that, and we did crawl the web, but for a negative way. There was a lot of spam on the internet in 2007 through 2010, and a lot of the links you clicked on were just bad. And so we would crawl the web looking for spam and then aggressively remove content farms and things like that. But even around 2010 and 11, most search engines, Google and Bing, got way better at that. And so nowadays, we don't mess around too much with the links and we get them from Yahoo and Bing is doing a decent job with that. We still work hard to do things to the query that make the results we think better. So Google, over lots of time, has stopped treating your query exactly. They do a lot of rewriting. And so we heavily weight against that. And so the links will look vastly different on our search engine than they will on Bing and Google. But to answer your question, I think everything's there. like you're not missing anything there. And we're hoping to deliver the superior search experience part on top via the instant answers. So the other way to look at this, sorry for the long-winded answer, but it gives you some background. When you look at a search engine, people click kind of in a power law fashion. So they click on the first link way more than the second link, way more than the third link. And so the instant answers, they're on top completely. And so if you have a lot of instant answers, they actually transform the search experience. And so we have about a third of queries now have instant answers on top. And we want to keep increasing that with the DuckDuckHack platform.
Just curious, how do you fund yourself?
So we are now profitable, which is great. So and we plan to have that be the case indefinitely. Before that, we had raised a round of financing, but it wasn't that big because luckily, as I mentioned in the intro, I had sold a previous company, so I could self-fund it mainly for those first few years. And then when we expanded the team, that was too much. I didn't have that amount of money, so we raised some money for that. But then in the subsequent years, as our traffic has grown, we're high enough now that we can support ourselves. So we have ads on the site. They don't track you. So the great thing about search as a market for privacy is there is no good reason that Google is tracking you for their search results. Most of the money on search is made based on your search intent on the query. So if you type in car, you get a car ad, or mortgage, you get a mortgage ad. All that can be done per query, even locally, because you can then throw away the local information, without tracking your search history or whatnot. The reason for all that tracking is because Google runs, they're really an advertising company, and they run 4 of the biggest ad networks in the world. So, they run AdMob for apps, and AdSense, and DoubleClick, and the fourth one is escaping me. But in any case, their ads are on millions of sites along the internet, including their properties that don't have search intent, like YouTube and Gmail. So they need your search intent to make good advertising across the internet. But we don't. We're just a search engine. So we can actually make money off of search ads and still throw away all your information.
Hi there. As a privacy advocate, I'm often kind of evangelizing about DuckDuckGo to friends of mine. And one of the selling features, I think, for people is often the bang operators, which you didn't talk about today. But I have some friends who are the kind of people who will always be logged into Google, and the way that they'll want to use it is to run their search, but with a bang operator for Google, so they're getting the encrypted results on Google. And I wonder if you've done any studies around whether or not that's getting them out of Google's filter bubbles, whether or not that, if they're actually logged in their browser, whether or not that's keeping that search history from being tracked with their account.
Yeah, so I think it's totally tracked. So in this 2012 study I mentioned with the election we ran, we had everybody have a complete fresh browser install, get rid of cookies and everything, and they were still individualized based on their previous history. So I think even if you're logged out or anything, they're seeing the browser fingerprint, certainly at the IP address level, but I think even further, and customizing based on that. So I don't think it is protecting them very much.
Hi, I had a question about balancing user experience and privacy questions. So coming from libraries, quite often we get folks suggesting features that are like, oh, well, do an Amazon thing. Like, if you like this book, here's another book. But because we don't want to track that patron data, we can't offer those things. Now, some folks say, let's do opt-in things to sort of balance those questions. But then, as anyone who's ever clicked on an iTunes agreement thing, we know that we'll opt in for anything. Just give us the stuff. We'll sign aware, or use my Facebook pictures, and that's fine. Just give me the stuff. So how, as a company that values privacy, do you kind of balance that, what people are willing to give up versus what we should let them give up? as you move forward with trying to think of features and things like that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so us in particular, and I think this applies generally, I think people jump to the personalization too quickly. I don't think it actually, in most cases, yields that much additional benefit. And there's a lot of just aggregation that you can do anonymously that often can get you most of the benefit there. So our first approach, and pretty much our only approach to date, has been to not collect any information and work on the search problem in aggregate. And we can do that to some degree because we have a lot of information. We get a lot of searches now. But I think that generally works well. Now, the other flip side of that, you asked about the opt-in. You know, I could give a whole nother speech on this, which I won't, try to keep it short. But you know, I just think this goes back to the regulation thing. I think the privacy policies are just bad, but that doesn't mean that they have to be bad. So you can imagine much more transparent privacy policies using iconography and other things to call out the bigger risks. So if you're familiar with like the mortgage and credit card kind of legislation in the country that went in the last 10 years, we're now like billing statements and mortgage application statements have to be formatted in certain ways and the risk called out in big type at the top. You can imagine privacy policies having similar regulation where things like that need to be called out. And so I think in that world, or in a world even where the company really cares about explaining it and makes it more of a quid pro quo of like, this is what you're getting, this is what you're giving up, as opposed to we're going to collect everything and just trust us. I think you probably could effectuate a good privacy policy and still collect some information. It just is not great examples in the wild.
Hi there. Are you focused solely on search, or are you planning on in the future getting into like the social media space or something else?
We thought about other areas, but then, realized we were kidding ourselves to do anything but search. Search itself is really, really difficult for us, and so our approach now is just do search and try to do it well, and try to encourage other companies to pick up those areas. Just try to get other companies doing the other areas.
Oh, good. The runner gets to ask a question. Do I? Do we have enough time?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I used to work for Northern Light Search, whose lunch got eaten by Google. And so I've been a DuckDuckGo user since you announced.
Thank you.
And looking for a verb, though, when people ask me something, I say, well, I went and found,
Yeah, it's a challenging one. We say duck it, but it doesn't catch on.
No. But I really want to thank you for the service. It is just, and for fighting the privacy fight.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are there any questions on social media? Right over there? Okay.
I wondered what you think of, when I think about the American people, and, we've been hearing a lot about the American people in this election season. There's a lot of ambivalence, there's a lot of anger. Some people are anti-immigrant, some people, I tend to think that they're all in favor of privacy until they think about bad guys. And, they think about ISIS or they think about mass shooters. And suddenly, they don't want those people's privacy to be protected. They want their own privacy to be protected. So I'm trying to figure out what my question is in there. I mean, I guess it's, what would your response be to somebody who says, well, I think your service is great, but I don't want, an ISIS person to be allowed to use it. I want them to be tracked.
Yeah, so I think, one interesting thing, if you're interested in delving this further, is the last Pew study they did, literally I think in May of last year, or maybe it was relatively recent. They actually it was a scenario study. So they asked very specific scenarios, kind of like what you're saying, of different kind of contexts of would you be okay with it in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. And what you found was very nuanced answers. Like, you know, there were swings in different cases, but it was never like, it never got to even over like 70%. And so what I take away from that is there are going to be people who don't care or would want it, you know, people to be tracked in different situations. That may even be the majority of people in certain situations, but it's not 100%. It gets up to like 60%. And so there's a decent sized minority who kind of, at least, you know, from my perspective, it feels like they're making the trade-off there and kind of understanding the bigger picture. And so I hold on to that percentage is my basic answer.
I have a question. So I've heard stories about things like Google results showing things that Google says are unintentionally racist or otherwise problematic. So it used to be, and I don't think this is still the case, that if you did a Google Maps search for N-word house, the White House came up. Is that something that you're thinking about in your algorithms? And is there any kind of social justice perspective that you're bringing to this?
Yeah, we do. It's really hard to do, though, in all honesty, because it's hard to find them, first of all. You know, like they often crop up and then you get notified. It's been hard to programmatically work on that. But we do think about that. But we think more from the perspective of the filter bubble question of trying to serve people the same, more objective piece and make sure that's happening. I don't have a great answer for you, though, other than that we do think about it.
She's faster than I am.
So my question is about transparency of the search algorithm. And I know, like recently Twitter, I don't know if it's in effect or not, but in attempt to make more money has you know, started using algorithms to show you what they think you want to see in, you know, the filter bubble approach. And you know, the whole trust issue with knowing who sees what on Facebook or things like that. Do you have a way for people to know how to what the algorithm's doing in terms of how the search results are prioritized?
So our approach has been first, like with the filter bubble piece, which you can verify pretty easily, to like serve people the same stuff, you know, in the links. Then in the instant answer piece with the DuckDuckHack, that's all open source. So you can see how that whole thing is working. To be honest, it's been open source for a while. Not a lot of people seem like they're mucking around in it, in the innards of the, you know, algorithm piece there, but it is there. In the link algorithm themselves, like I was answering over here, you know, we ride on a lot of other APIs. And so some of that is obfuscated from us. And so there's not a lot of reveal we could even make there. And so the places that we can reveal on the instant answer piece, we've just been trying to make it open source.
So obviously, some of us haven't had a lot of time to look at DuckDuckHack in the couple of minutes since you've mentioned it. But with all these libraries here, what is the most useful way for them to take all this data that they have that's already structured and tie it into this to add a lot of richness to that search and make the library content more easily accessible?
I probably should have a better answer to that. The answer is we would love to work with anyone who wants to make the search results better. So if people have kind of structured data they want to showcase and make accessible to a search on DuckDuckGo, we would just join the community and start asking questions, and we'll route you to the right place and talk with you.
Where are you guys on schema.org?
We, as a small company, have not participated in a lot of standard organizations in general, just because we haven't had the resources. In terms of like formats in particular, we basically made our own, like via duck.hack. And so we don't feel like we have too much of a role in those places. Oh, that's really answering your question, though.
A lot of us have made an investment in being able to structure our data that way, just because we want to get up in the Google rankings. But that's an entree. It might be an entree, or we think it's pretty weak. A lot of us, it's worse than Dublin Core. It's pretty weak. So there's a lot of space there for us to do things, and a lot of us structure data all day, and it's just a little bit change to our API, and we can feed you.
Yeah, I mean, we end up, like, a lot of what we do is, if you look at duck.hack, it's just translation wrappers around different APIs. And so, yeah, again, like, we would do the work to make it work,
I love the duck.hack thing you have. I'm curious if more of these hacks pop up. How do you deal with things like priority and approval? So if there could be multiple instances that show up, how do you decide which one shows up? And for that matter, who vets the quality of what goes in there? How does that whole process work?
So the vetting process is we're trying to do more and more community empowerment with it. So we have community leaders who take like first crack at reviewing things code-wise and design-wise, and we've been putting out guidelines and things like that. And so for the most part, that's been working pretty well. Like the guidelines and stuff are followed and whatnot. I mean, it's an interesting platform because our bar for showing stuff needs to be better than the links. And so those are the kind of guidelines we put out, but some people, like, they're not us, so they don't really know where that bar is. So to answer your first question is, we have internal metrics to basically know when something is showing if it's performing well or not, based on if people are interacting with it or not. And that is essentially a feedback loop in the aggregate to decide what we should be showing at different points. And so, like, the main instant answers are the ones that we've been doing ourselves, like images and maps. And so if you search something ambiguous anyway, like a place, like you may want a map, you may want the Wikipedia page, and so that logic is all the same kind of thing. It's like that, what people really want to see in that frame. But to answer your question more, it's like we haven't had a lot of overlap yet. Like, and there's so much white space there. Like, most things are not instant answers yet in these smaller communities. So there hasn't been a lot of overlap. The overlap's been mainly on our side, making the main instant answers.
We have one more question.
Do you find it challenging to retain and recruit technical talent against like the likes of Google and Facebook, or do you find that the mission of your company is enough to attract that talent, and is it incentivized in other ways besides like monetary benefits?
Yeah, so we've hired pretty much literally everyone from our community. So it's super mission driven. We've had only, I think, 2 people leave our company ever. So like we've had no problem recruiting people, but we don't actually go recruit people very much. Like, so we don't feel like we're in that race with the other companies.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you. All right, we have a 10-minute break. We're back here at 10:10. For those of you who are presenting for the rest of the morning, if you have not uploaded your slides onto the presentation computer, please do so now. See you in 10:10.